Years ago in Decoy magazine, we did a little profile on a guy named Tim Peterson, who over the last 25 years has assembled probably the finest Canada Goose Decoy collection of anybody in the world. And I thought his goose collection includes examples from all parts of the country. And by some of the finest decoy makers in existence. Tim got interested in Canada geese as a kid. He grew up in Minnesota, in Rochester, Minnesota, and he liked to hunt and fish and camp. And there was a lake in Rochester called Silver Lake, and there was a power company on the lake that would pull in water to cool the engines and pump the hot water back into the lake. So it stayed cleared. It didn't freeze up all winter long, and it probably had one of the largest populations of Canada geese in the north. About 300,000 geese, they said, would stay there throughout the year. So anyhow, Tim got this interest in Canada Goose Decoys and decided that he was going to put a collection together of Canada geese, and has recently decided that he's going to put it on a 3-year tour. He's got about 300 geese in his collection. The first exhibit opened up at the Pyramid in Ducks Unlimited in Memphis, Tennessee in August.
Bass Pro Shops.
The Bass Pro Shops. There's 200 geese in the exhibit. From there, after a year, it's going to go to Peoria, Illinois, and be in that Peoria Museum, the Riverfront Museum, for a year, and then it's going to go to the Shelburne Museum in Vermont for a year. So anyhow, I thought it might be fun to just go through all these different geese and talk about them a little bit. Some of you all might not be aware of some of these makers. This is Tim Peterson. He's a fairly young guy, and is in his early 60s. This goose he's holding here, when I did this profile on this exhibit, Tim really didn't want any publicity. He kept saying, make it about the geese, but I twisted his arm and he gave me a picture of himself. This is the Sleeping Crow Canada Goose that used to be in Jim McCleary's collection that is holding there. And that's I think it's a Remington painting behind him, but I'm not positive.
It's awesome.
Yeah. To coincide with the exhibit, they produced this book called The Canada Goose, Etched in Time, Carved in Wood. It's a really excellent book. I've gotten a copy of it and read it. A friend of mine told me that I probably wouldn't enjoy it too much because I'm not a waterfowler, but I'd like to look at the pictures. Well, he was absolutely wrong. Not only did I enjoy looking at the pictures, but it's an excellent book. If you like geese as a waterfowler, as a decoy collector, a conservationist, or you just like geese, you'd enjoy this book. All right, I thought we'd start down south. This is a Lee Dudley Canada Goose. It's one of 2 examples known. Guyette and Dieter sold this a few years ago. The only other example that I'm aware of, years ago, Ed Johnston bought what he thought was a Lee Dudley goose, Lee Dudley being from Knott's Island, North Carolina. But it turned out to be a Lee Dudley head on a George Waterfield body. He did later on find a Lee Dudley body and married them together, but that's the only other example I'm aware of other than this one. All right, here we have something close to home. It's a pair of Canada Goose Decoys by Nathan Cobb. The top one is my favorite Cobb goose. It's used to be in the collection of Adele Ernest. The last time it sold at a Christie's auction in New York, it brought a little over $500,000, and Tim bought it there. The swimmer below it I'm not sure if that was the one that Bill Purnell owned or the one that Lloyd Griffith owned.
I owned it.
You owned that, okay. Did you sold that privately to him, Bill?
Huh?
You sold that privately to Tim Peterson?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. But there are two fabulous examples. The one on the bottom, I believe, is an original Cobb paint. Obviously, the top one has several coats of paint. All right, here we got a pair of Canada geese by Dave Umbrella Watson, who was from Willis Wharf, Virginia. These are really two excellent examples. They're an original paint. And they've got his cut-down carving on the tails, and they're nice full-body birds. They're hollow carved.
Joe, aren't they hollow?
They're hollow, yes, they are. All right, here we got an Ira Hudson hissing goose from Chincoteague, Virginia. I believe, I think this is a balsa body, but I'm not 100% sure. It's a little, for me, it's a little stiff. Doesn't have the wonderful curvature that you see in some of the necks on Ira Hudson hissing geese, but it's a nice, clean example. All right, here we have a Ward Brothers Bishop's Head style goose. It's got the little hump under the tail. It's got a nice turned head, wonderful bill carving. I don't know when Tim acquired this one, but there have been two really good examples that have sold in the last few years. One brought it close to 300 grand, I believe, out of Alan Hayes' collection. And that was purchased by a fellow who is going to be opening a museum in Chestertown, Maryland next month. I'll be writing some about that in the next issue of Decoy magazine. All right, here we're going a little further north up to Philadelphia. This is a John Blair hollow carved Canada goose from Philadelphia. You find two different styles of Blair geese. This is what I call like their thin-bodied model, but he also made a big, fuller, full-bodied model that I actually enjoy a little bit more. Some of these thin ones like this were actually found under a porch, and I'm not sure that this is one of them, but they were found under a porch, and they were in, the head was off of them, and they had to be reassembled. I'm not sure if this is one of those or not, but it's a John Blair, and there is still a lot of controversy if John Blair really made decoys.
Hey, Joe, didn't one of those just sell last auction for a whole bunch of money? 300-some thousand?
I don't believe so, but I could be wrong.
It did.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. All right, here we have two Shorts Canada geese. The one in the back is by Harry V. Shorts, who was from Tuckerton. And the one in the front is by Harry M. Shorts, who was his son, who lived in Ocean City, New Jersey. They're hollow carved. The hissers are by far their finest creations, and I think this pair sold together as a pair for around 200 grand about 15 years ago. All right, here we have a pair of hollow Canada geese. They're by Sam Soper, who I believe was from Barnegat, New Jersey. There's not a whole lot, I've never seen anything other than Canada geese attributed to Sam Soper. The first one I'd ever seen was a tall-necked sentinel goose that came out of a collection in upstate New York. But this is a swimmer and a preener. Not too many New Jersey geese have a lot of action, you might say. Most of them are kind of just straight up. But all of Soper's geese seem to have a little bit of motion to them. All right, this pair of geese here, they're also hollow. The maker's never been identified. They're all branded T. Gray. There's been a lot of controversy on where these are from. Some people, I think Don O'Brien was one of them, insisted they had to be from Massachusetts because of the quality of construction, but that's being a little, you know. Frank Schmidt told me that a couple of these that he acquired for their auction house came from the Delaware River area, and that's where I would believe they were from. There's also a preener that sold at the Copley auction this year. That preener, and I believe the one on the right here, were originally purchased by a collecting couple from Buffalo out of a antique shop in Georgetown in Washington, D.C. in the 50s. But I kind of think these are Delaware River. They're hollow carved, which you would expect from a Delaware River decoy. All right, now we're up into Massachusetts. This is a pair of Canada geese by Joe Lincoln of Accord, Massachusetts. The preener, the hisser is quite nice. It's got a really nice crook in the neck. There's not a whole lot of embellishment on the carving of Lincoln's decoys, but they're very well painted, and they were probably very good decoys. This here is one of my favorite Canada Goose decoys. It's made by a guy named Charles Safford from Newburyport, Massachusetts. It's hard to tell in this picture, but this decoy, as you can see, there's a piece here, there's a piece here. It's made of many different pieces of wood laminated together and carved. The only geese that the only decoys that I'm aware of that Safford ever made were Canada Goose decoys. Most of them are big, oversized decoys. Most just have a straight head. The first time I laid eyes on this goose in a guy's house in Duxbury, Massachusetts, I literally fell to my knees. I couldn't believe how fantastic it was.
Right inside the front door on the
Yeah. And it's interesting because Safford came from a very wealthy family in Newburyport, but they had like a cabin or a little thing out in the far reaches of their property, and that's where he spent most of his life. You know, he could have stayed in the big manor house, but he liked hanging out there in the marsh, and he loved to shoot Canada geese.
He's probably out there with Bill Bowman.
Oh yeah. All right, this is the preening goose that Tim Peterson was holding in that earlier picture we showed. This came out of a Skinner's auction in the early 1980s in Massachusetts, and Richard Oliver bought it for 50 grand. I think it was like 1983 or something. And that was a lot of money in 1983. And Richard, right after he bought it, immediately sold it to Jim McCleary with the understanding that he could parade this decoy around for a few months to promote his auction business. I encountered this goose in I think it was 1983 at the Waterfowl Festival in Easton, and Richard had it on his table, and it says, "We not only sell for the most, we pay the most." He had sold it, I think, to Jim for $80,000, something like that. So he was making a nice profit. And I was kind of new in Decoy magazine at that time. I'd still just been doing it for a few years, and we were always looking for material to put in the magazine. And I looked at that goose and I said, "This would make a great cover." So I said, "Richard, could I take this decoy and take a picture of it somewhere?" And he goes, sure. And I'd never met Richard in my life. So I walked around with this decoy for about an hour trying to find an appropriate place where I could find good lighting to take a good enough picture to put it on the cover. And I think that goose is on the cover of my winter 1984 issue. The last time it sold at the McCleary auction, it brought over $500,000. This is also an Elmer Kroll. This came from the Harry Long collection. In the early 1900s, after Elmer had worked for Dr. John C. Phillips for a number of years, a lot of Phillips' fellow Harvard graduates and physicians at Boston General that hunted with Phillips sort of became benefactors of Kroll in a way. They would commission him to make decoys that they never intended to hunt with. They just thought they were beautiful. This decoy was made for Harry Long, I think, in 1905, and it sold at a Copley auction. And I think it brought around $600,000 about 20 years ago. And it's like a nesting posture, I believe, and you can see it has crossed wingtips and wonderful Kroll paint. All right, we're into New Hampshire now. This goose here is made by George Boyd of Seabrook, New Hampshire. Boyd was a shoemaker, and this goose has a bottom board, a wooden frame, bent wooden frame, with a wooden head and breast and an inserted wooden tail, and it's covered with canvas and painted with canvas. And I'm sure if you had to haul a half a dozen of these into the marsh, you were really happy that it was a canvas-covered hollow goose, because it probably lightened the weight on them. And this is a really, really nice example. I believe this is one that was found at a girls' school in New Hampshire. I don't know how they acquired it, but I think when it came out, that's where that bird originated from. This here is also a George Boyd goose, and this is a hisser. There's 2 or 3 of those available. And the last one of these that sold, I didn't really think brought a whole lot of money for what it is. It's a wonderful posture on the goose. But again, it has a bottom board. It's got a wooden head and breast and an inserted tail covered in canvas. This decoy is by Captain Osgood from Massachusetts, and the town escapes me at the moment. But there's only about a half a dozen of these geese that are known. 5 of them are in the Shelburne Museum. There's a preener. It's their signature group. When you walk into the Shelburne Museum into the Dorset House, in the first display case, you'll see 5 of these Osgood geese. This is the least of the group. But it's interesting. I was doing a show in Stockton, California, and it would have been probably in the late 80s. And I'm going to set up in the show, and I'm pushing my luggage cart with my books and magazines on it, and the guy in front of me is pushing a luggage cart, and that decoy is on the top of it. And it was like, oh my God, that's an Osgood goose. I had never seen one that wasn't in the Shelburne Museum. So I'm pushing further, and I catch up with this guy. I said, what can you tell me about this goose? He goes, oh, that's a Captain Osgood goose. Well, I wasn't happy to hear that. So I said, well, what's the deal? Are you selling it? And he goes, no. He goes, but I want to trade for a good California decoy. So he ran a half-page ad in Decoy magazine. Ronnie Swanson called him up, who was from Michigan, a collector from Michigan. Ronnie traded him one of those Bergman canvas flying Brant for this goose. Ronnie paid Cameron McIntyre to go to the Shelburne Museum to study the geese in their collection, because this thing had no paint on it. Cameron painted that.
Wow. It's quick, or what is it?
This is, the way these were constructed, the heads could be removed. And this is that goose with the head removed. Supposedly, Osgood made these when he was in port. He was a ship captain. He was in port in Oregon. I believe these are made out of redwood. So these were made in Oregon, but he, like I say, he was from Massachusetts. That's what it looks like with the head off.
Is that a cotter pin?
Some kind of pin. You can see it would slip through there. Yeah, you'd put that in there, you slip that pin in, and it held it. So you could transport these to the blind a lot more easily if you could take the heads off. All right, we're heading out to the Midwest. This is a hollow Canada goose by Robert Elliston from Bureau, Illinois. Elliston is often considered the sort of the godfather of Illinois river decoys. He was probably one of the earliest makers, and most people sort of copied his style, be it Graves or Purdue or many others from the Illinois River. And one feature of his decoys, the eye placement always seemed to be a little high, just a little too high. But this is, I think, one of only 2 or 3 known examples. They don't hunt a whole lot of Canada geese in the Illinois River, so you aren't going to find many goose decoys. This is a pair of Canada geese by Charlie Purdue from Henry, Illinois. They're hollow as well. I almost think that Charlie painted these. The paint doesn't look as well blended. Most of his decoys were painted by his wife, but Charlie also did paint. But these are 2, again, rare examples. There are not many Canada geese by Purdue in existence. Now this pair here, you can see it's 3-piece body. The body is made out of 3 pieces. And these are attributed to Charlie Purdue. However, Joe Tonelli, who is one of the early collectors from of Illinois River decoys and one of the experts, I guess you'd say, on Illinois River decoys, he's not convinced. But it is an interesting pair with the sleeper and the upright. All right, this is a pair of, these are by Charles Schoenheider of Peoria, Illinois. There's the floater, which is a hollow bird, and the stander. Schoenheider was got an order for a dozen geese. He also made standing pintails and mallards as well. You can't see it in the picture, but there's a metal foot on that stander. And supposedly what you would do is, with the ducks or the geese, is that you would heat that metal foot, and then you could melt it into the ice and let it refreeze, and then put the standing decoy on it. So Schoenheider makes for this guy a dozen. There's 1 floater and 11 standers. When the guy came to pick them up, Schoenheider wanted, I think it was $25 a piece. And the guy goes, I ain't paying you that. So he basically put them in storage in a shed or a warehouse or a barn or somewhere, and they weren't found until the 1960s. Tonelli told me that in the 1960s, Schoenheider's son was selling them for $100 a piece. Joe said he had enough money to buy 2 of them. And I think the last one sold for $185,000. So, another funny story about those standers, Joe French, another early collector from St. Louis who used to go to the Illinois River to buy decoys, he bought a few of them. And he used to do a lot of trading with Bill Mackey. And so he tells Mackey about these and ships him one to sell it to Mackey. Mackey said it was the ugliest damn goose he'd ever seen. He shipped it back to Joe, didn't buy it, but forgot to send him the metal foot back. So he had to have another foot, not for this one, but he had to have another foot. But there's 11 of them. When this exhibit gets to Peoria in 2026, in the fall of 2026, they're going to try to get all 11 of those standing geese if they can get the other owners to lend them. All right, this pair here is by Enoch Reindahl of Stoughton, Wisconsin. They're also hollow. Lots of interesting tail carving, wonderful bill carving. Enoch was an interesting guy. He lived right next to a marsh and spent a lot of his time in that marsh, and was very intimate with the ducks. He was also a photographer, and in the 1940s he wrote an article for Field and Stream about his decoys, and he took self-portraits of himself putting the decoys out, and he had no indoor plumbing or sewage. He had an outhouse. And Joe Tonelli one time went and tried to buy he also made wonderful ducks as well as geese. And Joe offered him a bunch of money. And he says, Enoch, you could put indoor plumbing in your house if you sell these to me. And Enoch, and this is Wisconsin, which in the wintertime is pretty cold. He says, I've been using that outhouse all my life. I don't need indoor plumbing. But he was a clever guy. He had a wood stove in his house, and he had a wooden toilet seat, and he would keep it next to that wood stove. So when he would go out to the outhouse in the winter, he had a warm seat.
That's funny.
All right, this pair here is by John Tax of Osakis, Minnesota. It's an upright and a feeder. This is what he was noted for. Again, some of these birds are laminated pieces of wood together. You know, you couldn't find a piece of wood that big to make a goose. And he also made snow geese. And his snow geese and his Canada geese are quite valued. He did make some standing ducks, but not many. He also made some stuffed canvas duck decoys. That, but the geese are his thing. That's what he's known for.
Birdhouses and fish.
Yeah, birdhouses and fish. All right. This is a pair of geese by Jerry Maston from Oregon. You don't get many Canada geese out west, goose decoys out west, because to where you would have hunted them would have required you to carry them a long distance. So mostly what you'll find are these paper mache, paper decoys, silhouettes, just silhouettes. This is a very, very rare sentinel and a lowhead by Jerry Maston. In addition to vintage decoys, Tim also likes contemporaries. The one in the back is by Cameron McIntyre, right here in New Church, and the one in the front is by Mark McNair. In addition to the geese, I mean, the decoys, Tim also collects paintings of geese, etchings of geese, goose calls, shot shell boxes with geese on it, anything goose related. So I decided I'd add a few. The rest of these aren't from Tim's collection, but these are some other examples of geese. I thought this would stretch this out a little bit. This is probably one of the finest construction geese ever made. It's hollow. The neck is inletted into the body. The bill or the face is joined into the head. There's been a lot of controversy over the origin of these. Adele Ernest found this and another in the 50s at a sale in Columbia, Pennsylvania. It was like an estate sale or something at a farm or something, and she bought 2 of them. And then later, some years later, went back to Columbia, Pennsylvania, and bought one out of an antique shop. Again, Donald O'Brien wrote this article for the Maine Antique Digest where he swears these had to be made in Massachusetts because of the superior construction. But, you know, Columbia, Pennsylvania ain't far from Philadelphia. In the 18th century, some of the finest furniture ever made was made in Philadelphia. In the mid to late 19th century, some of the finest carousel figures ever crafted in America was made in Philadelphia. I would put good money on it that this bird was made in Philadelphia and it was used, you know, somebody signed up to have these made for them, and they were used on the Susquehanna River in Columbia. But that's an excellent. This bird here sold for $810,000 out of Donald O'Brien's collection about 7 years ago.
Wasn't there one of those found in South America a few years ago?
Yes, it's a long time ago, 15 to 20 years ago. One showed up in Patagonia in Argentina at a gun club, and Sotheby's acquired it and they put a big estimate on it and it didn't sell. I don't know whatever happened to that. But the other one of the...
Florida too, wasn't there, several years ago?
Gary Guyette one time showed me a picture that a guy sent him. It was literally 2 logs with those heads on them, with those wonderful heads and necks. They were just attached to a log. Anyhow, this here is a Walter Brady goose from, at least that's what we still call them, or, you know, some people think they might be made by a member of the Dowdy family, but it's... Bill Purnell owned my favorite at one point, and that's in Tim Peterson's collection. I wasn't able to get a picture of it, but this is a nice example. This is a hollow Canada goose by Eli Dowdy. This came out of an auction in west of Philadelphia, where a guy had collected decoys up through the 60s. And it was a whole series of auctions. One was antique tools and all sorts of other different stuff, and one was decoys, and there were some excellent decoys. Besides this goose here, there was a wonderful Blair goose, there was some wonderful Upper Bay teals, there was just some terrific birds, like I said, that the guy had probably purchased when they were cost nothing.
Ned Hudson Penny.
Probably.
That was the one in Conestoga, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm not sure. You might be right.
We were there. He had old nail kegs full of swords, and they were bringing like $80,000 to $100,000 a piece on the internet. They were just pulling the swords out and holding them up. Of course, they had pictures and everything of them. It was an incredible collection.
Yeah. Well, Now we go to Cambridge, Maryland. This is an Ed Phillips, what they call a tiger stripe goose. It belongs to Larry Foxwell, and we had, this is just some picture I had in my file, but it's a wonderful sentinel goose. It's got great paint on it. I'm sure there's a lot of guys in this room that would love to have it tonight.
Eddie Dean.
And then this is also an Ed Phillips goose with a different paint pattern. You know, it doesn't have all that striping on it. And but again, it's a sentinel. It's a real high neck. It's a really wonderful profile. It's an excellent goose, and I'm sure a lot of people here tonight would like to have this one as well. This is an early Ward goose, and is this yours, Bill?
Is that yours? I don't think so.
Okay, but this is a real early one, probably from the 20s, would be my guess. It's what they call a low head, high tail, like the black ducks in a way. You see those black ducks with the low head and the high tail. And this is a balsa goose. This is a Ward balsa goose. It's got an inserted tail. It's got nice paint. It's got a really nice big full, huh?
I had a dozen balls at Ward Geese.
I think this is yours.
Oh, is it?
I believe so. I took this picture at your house last year.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't recognize it.
All right.
There's so many of them, Bill.
Here we have an Ira Hudson hissing Canada goose that has a more of a classic hissing look to it. And this is yours, Gary, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we had this in our exhibit last year at the Havre de Grace Decoy Museum, so I had a picture of it. This is mine. It's a hissing Canada goose by Miles Hancock. It's one of the better Miles Hancock hissers that I've encountered. I purchased this at a Pook and Pook auction, and funny story, it was the first time I'd ever bid online. I had to have a friend of mine come in and show me how to do it. And there was one lot that had a Charlie Joyner sleeping redhead from his hunting rig, and a Lloyd Tyler yellow legs, and a Ralph Murphy bluebill. That's the lot I wanted to buy. But there was a lot that had a re-headed hissing goose in it. So I'm practicing going through there. I want to make sure I don't miss this other lot. And I said, I wonder what they call this re-headed goose. So I click on it, and I open up the page, and down in the corner I see this goose. Then I read the caption, and it says, 2 Canada Goose Decoys. And I thought, God damn, they posted the terrible re-headed one on their site, not this. So I prayed that no one else saw it, and somebody else saw it, but not nearly well enough.
We talked about it the next day. You and I were bidding on both lots against each other.
Yeah. So, but it's a real nice example. All right, this is a Charlie Joyner goose. It's from probably the 50s. You can't tell on the bottom, but it was a stick-up used in the cornfields outside of Chestertown, and it has the bracket on the bottom where you would screw a pole into it and stick it in the cornfields. And it's nice original paint. This is one of my favorite Canada geese by anybody from New Jersey. I know most New Jersey collectors wouldn't agree with me. They love Shords and Horners and what have you. This is by Clark Madeira. And the painting is spectacular. It just has a lot more motion and form than you see in most New Jersey geese. I think Clark Madeira is probably one of the most underrated decoy makers from that region. That used to belong to John Clayton, who's passed away some years ago. I don't know who owns it today. This is a hollow with a bottom board Canada goose by Phineas Reeves from Long Point, Ontario. He was one of the first caretakers of the Long Point Gunning Club up there, which is a famous gunning club in Ontario. And his son Charles and grandson Jack also made decoys, and eventually, and he had a son named Frank who made decoys as well, who actually also involved as caretakers of the club. But he was the first caretaker, and this goose is probably made it before 1870. At first look at that, you might think, that looks a little bit like a Shang-Wheeler goose. Who it's by is actually Heck Whittington from Oglesby, Illinois. Shang-Wheeler in 1923 got best of show in the first decoy competition ever. And Heck became aware of him, and in the 1930s started corresponding with Shang. And he really admired Shang's decoys, and he asked Shang if he'd be willing to share his patterns with him. So Shang actually sent him patterns, and he made this goose off of a Shang-Wheeler pattern probably in the 1940s. All right, this is by Ken Anger. It's from Dunnville, Ontario. People referred to him as the rasp master because you could see they all have this rasp surface on them. And that was supposedly to cut down on the glare in the hunting rig. You don't see too many of his goose decoys. This one had belonged to a guy named Marty Malloy, who passed away in March, and I'm sure in the next, if not in November, in the next year, it'll come up for auction. This is a goose I just recently purchased at a Jeffrey Evans auction in Virginia. They called it a sign. They called it a Canada Goose sign. And I had them send me pictures of it. There's no words on it. I've never seen a sign with no words on it, you know, like there's no hardware that you could hang it. So it's like, this is a decoy. This is a Canada Goose decoy. It probably was used on a trifold or something.
2 or 3 holes in the bottom.
Yeah, it's only about 2 inches wide, but the breast part of it up here is probably that wide. It has a really, really neat look to it. And I love the crooked neck, and it was like, I have no idea who made it. I have no idea. I tried to go through the auction house to see if I could find out from the consignor what he knew about it, but I sort of ran into a dead end. But it's a really, and it's big. It's like about yay big.
You know what I think it is? I think it's a standard for a bodybuilding rig. Where you would sink it in front of you, and you could mount your gun on the back of it, and you hide behind it.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean,
Stuck in the war, didn't it, Don?
yeah.
Yeah.
They usually use swans to do it, but I've seen geese too.
The elephant were doing that.
Yep.
yeah.
There's no holes on either side, like where you would put your gun or anything.
Where you would mount a box.
Yeah, but and there's holes in the bottom, like
Where you put a pole.
pins or something, like if you put it on a frame or something. I don't know. I really don't know anything about it, but I really like it. It ain't a sign, no. What else we have? Oh, this is by the Salter family from Portsmouth Island, North Carolina. There was a pair of these that came up at a Copley auction some years ago. One has a slightly swimming attitude, and this one is upright. Portsmouth Island is just south of Ocracoke. And Portsmouth Island and Ocracoke are about the only 2 areas in North Carolina that actually made wooden goose decoys. Most everything else was canvas over wire. I don't have a picture of the bottom of this to show you, but both this and the companion goose it came with, the guy took a drill and drilled 30 holes in the bottom of them to lighten them, so they would weigh less. And according to Jerry Towton, he thinks this bird is made of probably around 1870. And Portsmouth Island is now uninhabited, is no longer inhabited. Back then, there were actually people living on the island. Oh, I brought this. This is a goose I bought a couple years ago at an auction in Pennsylvania. It's got carved eyes. It's Crisfield through and through. On the bottom in paint, it's written LC Dies, like somebody just took a paintbrush, LC Dies. I don't know if that's the owner or the maker. I know Barfield sold a pintail on Saturday called Elwood Dies. Of course, that wouldn't work with these initials, LC, but I don't know who made it. Some people have guessed that it could be Noah B. Sterling, but I don't quite buy that.
There's quite a few other Sterlings with that LC Dies with the bottom of them.
Yeah.
That are around.
Yeah, Bill Weibel actually has a rig mate to this. He sent me a picture of his. But it's kind of a cool bird. I think it's kind of neat, and it's probably early 1900s. And this is a Jim Holly goose from Havre de Grace, Maryland. It's got scratch feather paint on it. This belongs to John Sullivan. It's got a little higher neck than you see on most of them. They're by far the most coveted goose decoys from the upper Chesapeake Bay. And this is a terrific, terrific example in good original paint. And that might be it.
That's it.
That it? Okay.
That's funny, I just heard somebody yell.
That's good, Jeff.
Lights.